Hello, welcome to Macworld. Welcome to our iPhone buying guide. In front of me I've got 5 iPhones. These are the 5 iPhones that Apple currently sells. We've got the 5S, the 6, the 6S, the 6 Plus and the 6S Plus. And if that sounds confusing, don't worry. I'm going to explain a bit about the differences between these iPhones in this video and try and help you work out which one is right for you. The first decision you need to make, and this is probably the most important, is to do with screen size. The iPhone 5S is a 4-inch iPhone. That's the screen size measured diagonally from corner to corner. The next two up are both 4.7-inch phones, and the Plus models are 5.5-inch. Now, what does that mean in practice? Well, obviously it's not going to fit in your hand quite so conveniently as we move up the size, and it's going to depend on the size of your hand as well. We'll use my hand for comparison. My hand is fairly average for a man, I think. The 5S in my hand is very comfortable, very portable, very easy to use. It is a one-handed device very easily. You'll see that if I hold it fairly conventionally, I can touch the whole of the screen very easily. And as well as that, it fits very easily into a pocket. It takes up very little space, it's very light. This is only 112 grams. If we look at these larger phones, then we'll immediately see that it's a bit harder to use than one-handed. This is the key. If I use this in a standard way, you'll see that I can't quite reach the top, perhaps 3 icons at the top left. Now it's for that reason that Apple created a feature it calls reachability, where if you double tap on the home button, it pulls down the top sort of half to 2/3 of the screen and it brings it down to the bottom so you can reach it easily. But you'll see that Apple has felt it necessary to make some kind of compromises because the screen size is a bit too hard to use one-handed. And for the same reason, they've put the power button on the right-hand side of the iPhone instead of on the top, which is where it is on the iPhone 5S. Now this doesn't really have any huge bearing on the way you use the phone, but you can sometimes find if you're using it one-handed that as you press the power button you will also hit the volume buttons that are on the other side, and they can stop each other from working properly. So that can be a bit annoying. If we move up again to the Plus models, this applies equally to the 6 Plus and the 6S Plus, you'll see that it's really much too big to use one-handed. So we're relying a lot on reachability. To be honest, most people forget that's there and don't use it very much. So what we tend to do is use it as a two-handed device. It's still slim, it's still fairly light. The heaviest of the 5 iPhones we've got here is the 6S Plus, which is 192 grams. So we're less than twice as much in weight as the iPhone 5S, and they are still very portable, very easy to use. Very easy to hold one-handed at least, because they remain light and slim. But you should bear in mind that if you're putting these phones into a pocket, that the larger ones will bulge out a little bit. They're not quite as pocketable. These 2 phones in particular are better for people who have a handbag or a rucksack that they carry around all the time. But there are plus sides to having a larger screen. Obviously, these largest phones are very good for gaming. They're very good for watching films and TV because it's very close to having a tablet experience almost, watching a film like this. Well, we call them phablets in fact because they are halfway between a phone and a tablet. There are a couple of other differences as we move up the scale that you should know about. The 5S is the only remaining 4-inch phone that Apple sells, as I may have mentioned, but it's also the oldest phone that it currently sells. This is from 2013. The 6 and the 6 Plus are from 2014, and the 6S and the 6S Plus are from 2015. And understandably, the 5S from 2013 is starting to look a little bit slower, very slightly slower. It has less of a future ahead of it. It will start to slow down seriously with future iOS updates. So you probably look at this as being worth maybe 1-2 years more of high-speed use, of convenient use, and then it will start to become a bit outdated. Whereas these later phones, you have more of that to look forward to. It has the weakest camera of any of these here. It doesn't have Apple Pay. It doesn't have a barometer. It doesn't have Wi-Fi calling, which all 4 of the other phones here do. So if you're very, very desperate to have a 4-inch phone, if you're very keen to have a small phone, this is your option, but bear in mind that you'll have to make some compromises in return. There are other differences actually between these phones in terms of size that you should know about. One is battery life. As we go up the scale, then Apple has room to fit in larger batteries. So if you look at the battery life for internet use over 3G, we are looking at very approximately 8 hours, 10 hours for these two, and 12 hours for these two, if that's an important thing for you. The screens themselves, as well as being larger, also get you get a higher resolution as we move up, which is what we would expect, of course, because the screens are larger. But for the top two, the Plus models, the number of pixels is not only larger, but it is proportionately larger. So they're actually sharper as well. They have a higher pixel density. So these 3 phones at the bottom have a pixel density of 326 pixels per inch, which is really sharp. Don't worry about that. But these two have a pixel density of 401 pixels per inch, which is super sharp. But those are the main differences between them in terms of size. And hopefully now you've decided whether you want a 4-inch, a 4.7 inch, or a 5.5 inch phone. Okay, so we've decided, let's say, that you want to have a 4.7 inch iPhone. So now we're trying to decide between the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6s. There are a number of differences here. It is a major update. First of all, let's talk about speed. The iPhone 6 has an A8 processor, whereas the iPhone 6s has an A9, which is one generation further along. It's considerably faster than the iPhone 6s. You'll find that on current apps there isn't a huge difference between them because current apps are not particularly demanding. The iPhone 6s is kind of overkill at the moment, but more demanding apps will be written in the coming months and years to take advantage of its speed. So if you want to use very graphically demanding games or simply very processor intensive apps such as video editing apps, things like that, in the years to come, then you will find that the 6s will be a more future-proofed option for you. The camera is better. We've moved up from a 1.2 megapixel front-facing camera to a 5 megapixel front-facing, and if you look at the rear facings, we've gone up from 5 megapixels to 8 megapixels. We also gain the new feature of live photos, which is, some would say, a bit of a gimmick, but quite fun. That's a good feature. We've got a 3D touch screen. That's a new feature for the 6s and the 6s Plus, which means that you can do a harder tap and you get different options. Again, these are things that are fun at the moment, I would say, rather than crucially useful. But as more features emerge for them, as Apple and third-party app developers come up with more features for things like that, they are going to become more important. I'm a big fan of 3D touch myself, and having the pressure-sensitive screen is something that is going to be very useful across a wide variety of applications. The Touch ID is different. They both have Touch ID. Indeed, all 5 of the iPhones that Apple currently sells have Touch ID, but they've made it faster and more reliable. And last of all, you can get the 6s in pink, which I won't pretend is a deal breaker for most people, but it is a nice option to have. That is an option that you won't get if you go for the iPhone 6. So let's assume now that you've gone for the 5.5 inch phablet form factor that Apple sells. The differences between the 6 Plus and the 6s Plus are extremely similar to the differences between the 6 and the 6s. So again, we're looking at an A8 or an A9 processor, which makes it significantly faster on paper, but bear in mind that that will only become apparent on real apps as new apps are written for it. It has a better camera, the same specifications again, 1.2 to 5 on the front facing, and 5 megapixels to 8 megapixels on the rear facing. You get live photos. Something I didn't mention actually for the iPhone 6 and the 6s, but this does apply to both sets of phones, is that you now get a flash for the front facing camera, which is quite good for selfies. It's not a fantastic flash, it just makes the screen itself light up, but it's a good option to have. So hopefully now you've come to some kind of a decision. The iPhone 5S, which we have here, is the best option if you're looking for the cheapest or if you're looking for the smallest. It's the only 4-inch iPhone that Apple sells. We're not even sure if they will ever sell another 4-inch iPhone. We hope they will, but it's not guaranteed. That is only £379 for the 16GB version. I would personally recommend that you get the 32GB version, because I think 32 is kind of the minimum now. 16 is, you can cope with 16, I do personally, but you have to constantly delete things to keep on top of it. And the 32GB version is £419. The iPhone 6, which you have here, the 1-year-old iPhone 6, is a very good compromise option. It's a little bit more expensive, it starts at $459. And again, I would not recommend that you get the 16GB, I would recommend, well, in fact, the next one up is 64GB, that's £539. But for that you get a larger screen, you get a faster processor, you get a better camera. It is not as fast as the most recent generation, but it's still very fast. And it doesn't suffer from the very large form factor of the Plus model, which a lot of people will find too large for their hands. The 6S is a great option if you want that, again, that medium size, but you want the fastest possible phone. That's starting to get quite expensive now. That's £539 for the entry level and $619 for the 64GB model, which again is the one I would recommend. You get to the Plus models, the 6 Plus is the one to get if screen size is more important to you than speed. That's the same price as the 6S. And then we have the 6S Plus, which is the absolute flagship, the best iPhone that Apple sells. I don't know if I can recommend that as a value for money option for most people, but it does have every feature that Apple currently offers. It has Force Touch, it has live photos, it has a very fast processor and a very good camera. The only downside really is, number one, it's big, and number two, it's very expensive. It costs £619 for the 16GB model, and for the 64GB model, which is the one I would recommend, it's $699. Hopefully that's been some help. Good luck with your iPhone buying. We have reviews of all 5 of these models on our website, which is macworld.co.uk.